Kirsten, go ahead.
Okay, welcome. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I see some faces that I saw in the last session on program reviews. You're just gluttons for punishment today about program review. So we're excited that you're with us. Today we are going to do something that I think is going to be really helpful for everyone in general to understand program review from this kind of broad perspective. So Dawn and I today are going to discuss some of our external drivers of our college goals and talk about how that drives program review. And really what's helpful for you is to talk about how we all play a part in helping the college reach its goals through that program review process. And so we will get started, Dawn, unless you have anything you want to add to that.
No, let's get started.
Okay. So we will begin with a very quick program review overview. For those of you who haven't written in a while, who are probably writing right now, actually, we are on a new cycle. So we've moved from a 5-year to a 4-year cycle. And what that means is that every 4 years, our non-occupational or occupational and our instructional and our service units all engage in that process of reflection where you get data, you look at data, you answer questions on our program review template, you come to the committee and you talk to us about what you found. And then we also have built within that, but one of the main reasons that we switched to a 4-year cycle is a 2-year cycle for occupational programs. So those of you who are in our occupational areas, every 2 years, you will be writing an occupational program review. That's not new to you, that hasn't changed. But really what this looks like for us is a process of systematic evaluation. And so when I opened, I talked about how we have like these outside things that kind of drive our program goals or our college goals, and then that influences program review. And so program review is part of this process that allows the college to determine if we're effective and allows us to measure that effectiveness, to reflect on that effectiveness, and then to do things differently if we need to. And I think that's it on that one. Dawn, do you have anything you want to add?
No, so far so good. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, all right. So again, sticking with this brief overview of program review, we have basically 3 templates. So we've got our instructional template that has like two sub templates to it. So we've got our instructional program review. And then we have our occupational program review. And then also we have our service unit program review. And just to kind of give you a sense as we use these terms, so that way you can like have like a concrete thing to relate them to. So the instructional program reviews that are non-occupational would be things like, let's see, I see dance here. I see ASL. Well, no, ASL is occupational also. Let's see. So we've got dance, communication. Those are the areas that just write in the non-occupational instructional program reviews. And then we've got our occupational programs who end up writing both, right? You write to the instructional template and the occupational template. And so I see automotive, I see decision science, and CIT. So those are the areas that would write to both of those. And then our service units have your template, which is our service unit review template. And so this could cover a ton of different areas. So we've got student services, so admissions and records, financial aid, student support services, library and tutorial, technology support, and other service units like our administrative offices, distance education, business office. So everyone, we put this up here to kind of show you that everyone is engaging in this systematic evaluation process. And we all have an influence on helping the college to meet its goals. And we mentioned earlier that that these goals are often driven by these external sorts of things. And so in the next few slides, we're going to talk about the various influences on the things that we've identified as effectiveness measures, so our benchmarks for evaluations. And those things are going to be things like accreditation, what comes out from the chancellor's office, and so on. So let's go into the accreditation requirements. All right, so effectiveness is a super vague term, and we use some of our external drivers, the things that set those standards for us. We use that to help us to identify how we're going to determine effectiveness. And so some of the things you are going to see up here should be really familiar to you. Like, we talk about these pretty regularly, but we felt like it was helpful to kind of understand how we're a part of like this larger accreditation system. And then we've got the system, you know, that is our college. And then these things also we see in our program reviews. So one of the things that drives this idea of continuous improvement and systematic evaluation is accreditation. So you see on here success, retention, completion, employment in the field. And these are all ways for us to measure our success in meeting our goals as an institution. So institutionally, we measure these. And we'll look at, for success rates, success of students obtaining a degree or certificate, the amount of students who transfer. For retention, we're looking at both within semesters and between semesters. So sometimes we call that persistence. It depends on like what plan you're referring to. And then completion of math and English. This is completion of transfer level math and English in the first year. And employment in the field, we want to see the percentage of students who report obtaining a job in the field. And all of these come out of accreditation. So for any of you who participated in our accreditation writing cycle, you'll see that the college speaks to these indicators. And as a result of that, our college uses some of these indicators as our own benchmarks for effectiveness. And also the best way for us to determine if we're meeting those benchmarks for effectiveness is for us as individual areas. So our instructional programs, our occupational programs, our service units, to determine how all of those kind of have a role in helping the college meet them. Basically, we do this to show you that program review doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so John is going to talk more about that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kirsten. I want to jump in just real quick here. I think it's very important for everyone to understand that it's sometimes difficult, I think, for folks at the at, let's say, the course level, as a faculty member who's teaching my course, to kind of understand, how do I fit into, how is it that I'm helping the institution, this large institution, meet these overall goals? And when you talk about things like success, right? A student's success in your course, but then also that level of retention or persistence to the next level, the associated skills that they receive. You know, is that student able to build upon the skills they've gotten in your class into the next class and the next class? And obviously, there's this progression that we want them to achieve, because that's one of our goals, which is this idea of completion or degree attainment. And so, you know, every single individual on this campus is important to that process. Things like our student services area and the types of customer service that we provide to our students, right? The services that we provide in tutoring or library, right? Even the grounds on which we have, the food that we serve, you know, whether or not a classroom is clean and comfortable and has the appropriate supplies and materials. All of these things help us in ensuring that our students are successful in getting whatever, you know, degree or certificate they want, or sets of skills that they want, in order for them to be successful moving out of our institution. And so again, this is a really kind of high overview of what all of this looks like and how it's all integrated. But it's essentially important that we all think about all of the things that we do every day in terms of this kind of continuous improvement process. we are always evaluating whatever those evaluation metrics are. We're always evaluating how well we're doing, right? So you all establish your own self goals, for instance, as faculty members. Each of the service areas establishes goals, right? And so this program review process is really about that, right? It's about looking at the kinds of things that I can influence as a staff member of this campus in helping us to achieve those overall goals. So as Kirsten mentioned, okay, my turn now, Kirsten, is it? Sorry, I jumped in there.
No, it is, it's your turn.
Okay, so as Kirsten mentioned, accreditation is one of those things that drives, looking at this systematic evaluation process. They actually call it a continuous improvement process. And I think it's important that we understand that, this idea of continuous improvement means that we have to come up with ways in which we can all agree upon, the benchmarks or the things that we're going to measure to determine whether or not we're being effective. But there are other influences on this. And so things like, the Vision for Success initiative that the Chancellor's Office put out a few years ago, right? Chancellor's Office looked at the overall performance, was looking at accreditation, how well institutions were doing in relation to the accreditation standards that were established, and then came up with their own benchmarks for things that we as an entire system were supposed to achieve. And so they established these goals over a 5-year period. And so here are some of the Vision for Success goals, things like a 20% increase in degrees and credentials and certificates, for instance, an increase by 35% in transfer rates to UCs or CSUs. And they've actually amended this as well. And now they're factoring in private institutions as well, because many of the community colleges actually send students to private institutions that are not part of California education system. One of the things that they did or looked at specifically was trying to decrease the number of units that were accumulated. When this first started, we were at approximately 87 total units accumulated by a student. They wanted to reduce that to 79 total units, particularly given that an ADT is at maximum 60 units. And so, obviously there are students who will take courses, aren't sure about what they want to do, might make changes to their career path. And so they might accumulate a few extra units. What the Chancellor's Office was trying to do was to help us to focus more on ensuring that students were getting the right kinds of classes in order for them to achieve whatever their educational goal was. And so they wanted to reduce the total number of accumulated units. At one point, our institution had students that had well over 100 accumulated units, and we've been slowly working on reducing that and trying to get better sequencing. The guided pathways concept also helped with this, right? So there's a couple of different ways in which we've been trying to help make sure that our students aren't getting too many units that they can't use as they move forward. Right? They also wanted to talk about increasing the employment rate of students in the CTE areas. And so when we talk about employment, we're also trying to focus on whether or not a student actually obtains employment within the field in which they study, right? So if I go and study to be a welder, and then I end up getting a job outside of welding, that might be fine, but the majority of students who go and get welding skills should be doing some kind of employment in the welding field, right? That should make sense. So in this particular case, when they established it, the rate was approximately 60% of students who were surveyed actually went into the field in which they studied. And what we're looking for is a rate that's above 75%. And then one of the goals that has kind of two components, or the last two have two components. They wanted to do a reduction over a 5-year period and then an absolute closure within 10 years. And so, for instance, like on equity gaps, they want to reduce the equity gap over a 5-year period, right? But, excuse me, they want to close that gap within a 10-year period, right? And then the same thing on the last one, which is to reduce the regional achievement gaps. Obviously, there's differences in each of the regions in California, and what they're wanting to do is to try to reduce the gaps between each of the regions in various aspects, employment, for instance, and then eventually to try to close those gaps as well within tiers. So pretty big goals, right? Kind of monumental goals for us too. But I'm going to show you in a couple minutes here that we've actually done pretty well as an institution on several of these things. We're actually successful in several of the areas, and we've actually surpassed some of them as well. So, all right, so next slide. So, as both Kirsten and I had mentioned on the accreditation slide and on the Vision for Success, you know, there are these standards that are established. Now, the specific numbers around these standards aren't necessarily established, except for in the Vision for Success. There are goals that we want to achieve based upon percentages, like, you know, 20% increase in X, whatever it is. But from an accreditation standard, there are larger visions of things like, you know, we need to show success, we need to show progression, kinds of things. And so what we've done is we take those overall standards and then we place them into what we call institutional set standards. And we take those and we group them into areas like learning progress, momentum, employment, and then overall success. And so you'll notice, for instance, here that under learning progress, right, because showing progress is an important aspect of this, we need to see a trend of increasing numbers. Course success rate, for instance, right? Our institutional set standard was at 71%. And you know, now it's at 75% as an average for all of our courses. So again, you know, it looks like we're doing pretty well from that perspective, right? So let me, okay, so success rate, for instance. We look at earned an associate's degree or earned a chancellor's office approved certificate. We've surpassed what we have set as our standard for us as an institution. And then things like graduation rate. We've increased our overall graduation rate. At one point, we were seriously flirting with an issue around the percentage of students who actually graduated. There is a kind of a minimum threshold for institutions at roughly 14%. And we were very close to that number for a period of time. And we've worked really hard to ensure that our students have been successful and that they apply for graduation and they apply for transfer and they actually receive their degrees. And so all of these efforts have helped us to, you know, of course, exceed some of the goals that we've had, right? But we still have others that we need to work on. So things like completion of transfer level math and English. Only 11% of our students, our goal is 25%. Our retention from fall to spring has declined a little bit. It's below our set standard of 67%. For those that are, so we're actually doing not so bad, but we've declined a little bit in students who actually go into the field in which they receive their skills from an employability perspective. That's declined a little bit. We want that number to go back up, of course. And then transfer to a four-year institution. Now, I have to point out here, we've done a pretty good job. We've gone more than 500 more since we started in 14-15, obviously, but we're still not up at the level that we'd like to see achieved. Right? So there's some room for improvement, room for growth in some of these areas. Anything, Kirsten? I'm sorry.
No, I would just reiterate what you already said earlier as you're looking at all of this data that we're giving to you, that you're thinking about how all of us contribute to those. So like it's this group effort of even something like course success, and you think that's only instructional. That is not. That is our service units working with our instructional units. We've got our student success teams now. So all of those things help to increase those course success rates, those transfer rates, all of those things are part of what we do specifically in our individual units. So just as you're looking at this, think about what you're doing.
So one of the things, and you know, don't try to read all of this. I'm going to show you a close-up picture here in just a second. But here's one of the things that we do. We have this really phenomenal IR group that actually takes and for instance, builds a matrix or a way for us to evaluate our effectiveness in relation to the various goals that are established by either accreditation or the vision for success. And so you'll notice here this top one, and I'm going to blow that up a little bit here. So goal 1, statewide or system-wide increase of by at least 20%, right? And so then what we do is then we go in and establish our goals from a strategic plan perspective, look at the various values over a period of time, and then we set our standards for them. So when I was showing you the graph with the set standards, for instance, we're evaluating this every 3 years as we're looking at our strategic plan, and then we establish a strategic plan, set our standards, and then we work from there to try to achieve them, for instance. So, and you'll notice here, right? So, here's the goal for 21-22, right? Increase all students who earn an associate degree. 1,661 was what our goal was. It was like a 17% increase for us, right? And so these are things that are established. Again, I want to reiterate the concept that Kirsten just put out there, that each of us has a role in all of this. As a faculty member, for instance, how do you help your students to earn an associate degree? You keep engaging them. You talk to them about what their progress is. You refer them to, either the transfer center, or you keep asking them the question, hey, if you know that yours is the last class in the sequence before the certificate or the degree, you're asking your students, hey, have you gone in and applied for graduation? Have you gone in and applied for transfer to UC or CSU or whatever it happens to be? And so encouraging them to, do this type of thing, to get their terminal degree, their indicator for that. And that helps us to achieve these goals as well, but obviously helps our students to get to that next level. Right? And so all of this really, right, is this kind of concept of integrated, processes, integrated planning. We take the accreditation requirements, we take the vision for success goals, we look at what our district does or puts out as their goals for their strategic plan. Typically, the district utilizes goals that are larger in scope. They look much more like what an accreditation standard would look like, right? Trying to achieve a particular thing, right? And all of these are factors, right? Vision for success, institutional set standards, district goals. They're all part of how we develop our mission, vision, core values, and then strategic plan goals. And obviously, the idea of continuous improvement here, right? This circle, this evaluative process, program review, and then unit and action planning, and then allocation of resources. There's an implementation process. Then there's an evaluation, and then we go back to this and look to see how we did, right? How are we progressing in what we were trying to achieve? Kirsten, I'm sorry, you were going to say something there?
No, I was just going to ask if there were any questions so far.
Okay, great. Jennifer, we seen any questions?
No, there's no questions in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, man. That's either really good or really bad. One of the two. Everyone's asleep right now. Okay. All right. So on to our next slide. We don't have too much more really here. So. All right. So Kirsten, you want to go with this one?
Yes, sure. Cheryl informs us that Cheryl Lynn says they're not asleep. So we're good.
Okay, good. So Kirsten, just so you know, I broke this down into the instructional metrics and then the service area metrics. Okay.
Oh, so we have a second.
So you have a 2 slides basically here. So.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Well, I'll start and then you jump in.
All right.
So when we're looking at some of the things of what program review drives, we're looking at things like student demand, which then can influence course and program development. And I guess really what I should have said is when we start this slide is sometimes it's really hard. Like I know as a faculty member, when I'm thinking about like what I'm doing in the classroom or what I'm doing just for our program goals and how we're achieving them, it's really hard to think about how all this big picture stuff that Dawn and I have been talking about influences that and influences my ability to do the things that I want to do in my program and for my students. And so as you're thinking about what influences what and what drives what, when we're looking at program review and data-informed decisions, you probably hear that phrase a lot. We're looking at how, as a college, we are making decisions that benefit all of our students, right? But those decisions are really driven by what we're seeing come out of program review. Program review is that systematic evaluation process that we're engaging in. So all of that said, program review can drive these sorts of decisions that we're going to talk about. So if you're looking at student demand can help us to determine the types of courses that we offer. Right now, we're looking at online courses, right? In the situation that we find ourselves, everyone had to go online. But as we're thinking about moving forward and coming out this pandemic, what sort of additional online classes should we be offering? Are there classes that we have found that work really well online, that if we're getting feedback from students that want to continue them online, are there ways that we can do that for them and foster that? And that's not just to say that what students get what they want, right? Other sorts of things have to drive that. So we can look at enrollment, whether or not students are enrolling in different classes and how that helps to drive the decision. We look at student success, how our students are successful in our classes, and how that can help us to determine, so take it out of instructional for a second, how that can help us to determine the services that are offered, the different things that we rely on. So how we work with tutorial in order to help our students be successful. And the programs that the college has identified as being helpful for our students. So all of that comes out of discussions from program review. So that's why we call those our data-informed decisions. Dawn, I'm going to let you talk about efficiency and to FTF because I always confuse those. So that's going to be on you.
So the institution is keenly aware that faculty members don't directly have influence over things like student demand or student enrollment, right? Obviously you do over student success, but that relationship between you as a faculty member and the dean for the area in reviewing, let's say, the overall course demand that you had for your courses within your program as part of the PR process, there should be a conversation where you're looking at those and saying, well, look, we don't seem to be getting quite the demand when we're looking at courses that are offered, in this type of sequencing method or this number of days or this time, for instance. All right, so have a conversation, and then the dean can work with you to try to schedule courses in a way that seems to fit more appropriately, perhaps from a student enrollment perspective. You do play a role in that from the standpoint of saying, potentially, if you have sequenced courses, I'm teaching COM 1, then COM 2, then COM 3. Well, as my students finish COM 1, I, as a faculty member, can be talking to them about, hey, listen, COM 2, next class, really great class. I'm also teaching that one, or, this instructor over here is teaching this, and then they're talking about going to COM 3. And then if I reach COM 4, I know that I'm close to getting my degree, then that faculty member can be talking about, here's the next step for you as a student, right? And so, again, this is why I keep reiterating this idea that every one of us plays a role in trying to achieve the goals, right? Both from a programmatic perspective, and obviously that's great for you as a faculty member, right? You're seeing success, your program is growing, right? And typically that leads to things like additional resources, additional faculty members, right? Meeting the demand of our students or our community in general. And then obviously student success. But student success just is not just about, that classroom performance. It's, you know, in the other classes, in completing their degrees and all the other kinds of things. Hey, Amy, you got a question?
I do. Can you help me out and tell me what, I know I've heard it, but just again, what FTEF stands for, what FTES stands for, and what the WSCH stands for, and then what they actually mean in a layman's terms.
You've got it. Okay, I'm going to right now. So, lots of people think that institutionally we just look at these things called efficiency numbers, right? Efficiency numbers are just one way for us to evaluate whether or not we're doing things correctly in either the resources that we have, the scheduling that we do, the marketing aspects, right? I mean, student demand, student enrollment are also greatly influenced on the marketing and the ease of registration and all of these other things. When we look at efficiency numbers, so WSCH, weekly student contact hours, okay? What we do is we develop a ratio of the weekly student contact hours to the number of full-time equivalent faculty members, okay? So FTEF, full-time equivalent faculty. And this is not just full-timers. This is full-timers and part-timers at a percentage of the full load kind of thing. But what we do is we look at this number to see how effective we are or how much contact we have with our students based upon the number of faculty members that we have. Okay, so who cares? What does that matter? I'm a faculty member in my classroom. What do I care? You individually probably don't care all of that much, but as an institution, it's a way for us to gauge whether or not we're applying appropriate resources to ensure that we have enough contact for our students for them to help be successful, right? And so again, if we're not doing our jobs institutionally to help with those things, right, there's not much you can do about it as a faculty member, right? But when you do look at other numbers, right, we look at things like, let's say, for instance, there's another efficiency number that we look at that has to do with the ratio of usage of the number of students to the faculty member, for instance, okay? And when we look at programs, some programs have numbers that are much lower than others because they have limitations related to the number of seats, for instance. A good example would be anything in CTE, right? Just about all of those programs have limitations because there's only so many bays in the auto area. There's only so many welders that we can have, right? So we can only put so many students. Nursing program, prime example. There's mandates for the number of students per faculty member, right? So when we look at those numbers, we know in some cases programs, they have limitations. You look at social science, for instance, that has large group instruction, those numbers go up dramatically, right? We look at this number called, it's a 525. It's an efficiency number associated with the number of students per faculty member based upon the number of Carnegie hours kind of thing. Okay, so we institutionally, we don't punish anyone. We don't not give people resources because they're not meeting some certain efficiency number. The state of California does look at those efficiency numbers and does talk about those, right? Because then it says, well, you have numbers that are, way too low. Why do you need additional resources for faculty or other things? Your weekly student contact hours are way, way low compared to everybody else that's of similar size. And so we need to look at those things institutionally to make sure that we're aligning resources appropriately, right? So FTES is full-time equivalent student, right? And so we look at those numbers, for instance, to see. And of course, right, when you're doing your program review process, you should be looking at those kinds of things to see how you compare to either other disciplines within your area or other parts of the college, right? To see, well, how are we faring in comparison to all of them? But we don't ever say, oh, welding, oh, that number's not good. You gotta, you're not as good as social science. Well, we know there's a difference, okay? We definitely know there's a difference. You are not gonna put 100 students into a welding class. This is not going to happen, right? So we understand that and we look at that as part of it. So what we look at is, what is your progress? Has that number been declining or has it been increasing? Right? And that's how we like to talk about those kinds of things. Does that make sense, Amy? Okay, all right. So the next part of this, I mean, obviously there's institutional metrics and then there are service area metrics. And so one of the service area metrics, let's say for my office, are these kinds of efficiency numbers. Do we have enough faculty members to meet the demand for our student demand, right? Are we seeing enrollments in certain programs? Are we seeing declines? That PR process also helps us to verify those things, evaluate them, and then take action on them if necessary, right? And so when you look at student area, like student demand, for instance, for a particular service area, how many students are coming into tutorial? How many students are coming to the library? How many students are using LI 118 computer lab? These are all part of ways in which we can evaluate whether or not we're doing things effectively. Do we have the correct number of service hours available? Should we increase them? Are we seeing nobody showing up between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. every day? Well, are we wasting resource by having a service open that no one's using, right? Student satisfaction, and we do lots of surveys on student satisfaction. And then just the general idea of service utilization, right? Are students actually going to and using these kinds of things? And so that's how we're measuring some of this stuff. So Kirsten.
Yes, so I want to kind of speak back to the last two slides we were looking at, because it relates to what we're looking at now on this slide. Is a lot of the discussion that we were talking about comes out in your program reviews. We've been saying this whole time that there's these kind of larger things that influence our institutional goals. Our program review is the process that allows us to determine how each of us as units are working to achieve those larger institutional goals, right? So the program review is that systematic evaluation. And I think one of the things that Dawn said that I think is worthy of reiterating is that when we're looking at particularly like those efficiency numbers, but even other numbers too, we're considering that in the larger context of the program. And the purpose of program review is to be reflective and offer to allow areas to see how it is we're doing, yes, comparatively to the institution, but why our particular program might be unique. So Dawn used the example of welding, how, you know, the enrollment is going to be different in welding than it is in a social science class. And there are these reasons for that. And that program review process helps us to reflect on that, to think about that. And then to help the institution make larger decisions based on that understanding. So that happens in program review. And so, so in terms of our program review goals, when we're in program review, we review our previous goals and we update on the progress of those goals. And that's that evaluative process. How well did we achieve the goals that we were working towards in our previous program review? Are those goals still relevant for us? Are there things that changed? I mean, oftentimes legislation changes and that changes our goals. So are there things that change that require us to move in a different direction? And also like larger systematic things might change that ask us to move in a different direction as well. So we look at our goals, we update our progress. And again, we've been talking about this evaluation, but this highlights that it's cyclical. So we have our program review. Let's pretend that you just wrote your program review. You've identified your goals for the next 4 years. And then what happens as you move forward is the following year, you'll have your annual unit plan. Those goals from your program review are likely to show up in your annual unit plan, and you update annually on those. So we're constantly engaging in this this process to help us to determine if we're meeting our goals. It's not just this like one-time thing that we do every 4 years. Otherwise, we would forget about things, right? So that's the purpose of those annual unit plans. And ultimately, our goal is constant evaluation, constant improvement. And even the process itself is being constantly evaluated and constantly, hopefully improved, right? So, I mean, take the program review templates. I mean, we have changed those, Don, what, 4 times just
Yep.
in the last 4 years?
Yep.
Like, I think every year we go through an iteration of the template based on, feedback from writers, feedback from the committee, feedback from training, all those sorts of things go into this constant evaluative cycle. And really what a lot of you might also find really important in all of this is all of that helps to feed into these resource requests. So these, the goals that we have and the resources that we think we need from the college in order to help us to identify those goals all come out of your program review, but then all continually get evaluated and updated in these annual, you could consider them progress reports, but they're your annual unit plans. You're determining what progress you've made toward them. Don, what else do you want to say about resources?
I was just going to the example of, this cycle of improvement. And I was just, it popped into my head thinking about ethnic studies programs, for instance, right? So let's say I did my program review last year, and then the CSUs come out and say, next year, every student's going to need to have an ethnic studies course. Oh, okay, we didn't plan on that. So now institutionally, we're going to need to help support that. I did my program review, I set my goals. That was not a goal of mine. But in my annual unit plan, I can go into that and say, okay, here is a change, here's something new, here's what I need, and here's the resources that are associated with that. And so don't think that program review means that you are stuck with a particular goal. If things change, obviously you have an opportunity to change and to request things. We would hope that you've established goals and then you can make progress on those goals annually, and you're going to write those down, and then what if something changes? Fine, you put it into your unit planning. You say not part of what we did from program review because there was a mandated change, or this came up in legislation or whatever. Now we need to request these kinds of resources to achieve this. And institutionally, it's important because, for instance, this year we hired some additional faculty members within the ethnic studies areas because we specifically knew we were going to need to address this as an institution with individuals who could help meet the demand, because that's what the UCs and CSUs have been asking us, right? And so again, I can't stress enough the importance of this process. I know a lot of people, they think it's burdensome, or they're not really happy with it. It used to be that everyone thought that the program review is a bunch of meetings. Everyone's always mad and everything. No, it is supposed to be a process that is helpful for you as a faculty member or a program developer to evaluate and to get some feedback and determine if, again, are you applying things in the correct direction? Is this helping to advance the overall institutional goals? And so that's really what this process is about. And we need you to think about it both from that kind of discipline level program area, but also in that larger picture of how we as an institution help our students to be successful. So the last part of this, Kirsten, was really to talk about, the CurricuNet integration idea, right?
Yeah, sticking with that whole theme of we're continuously improving, we are trying to invest resources to help us to do this better. And I think that's great.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, excuse me, my apologies. Jennifer, what's our time on today limit? Was it an hour?
We are here until 10:45.
Oh, wow, we've got quite a bit of time then. Okay, so how about I just jump out into CurricuNet real quick. Will that work for you, Kirsten? And then we can, I'm going to stop my share and put that away.
Before we go into CurricuNet, are there any questions that we have, any of the folks on here have related to some of the stuff we've talked about up to this point while Dawn gets CurricuNet going?
Is Kirsten?
Yes,
Kirsten?
go ahead.
Just for me, and for others, if I am a program X and I feel that going through program review is going to be a grueling process and the program review committee is going to punish me, for lack of better words. Is that what really is happening in a program review?
The program review committee is going to punish you?
Yes.
There's just no.
I just feel
No,
like I'm
thank you.
afraid,
Yeah.
and anxious going to
Uh-huh.
program review, and I hear bad things about program review. And so I'm just afraid going through the process.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Enrique. And I think that one of the things the program review committee has worked so hard on over the last few years has been really changing the culture of that. And they've done that in a couple of ways, right? They've done that through the template. So the template, all the templates are much more focused and specific in terms of questions that we think that writers have a better sense of what it is that we're looking for. The rubrics have really helped with that. So when you come into program review, you get this rubric that shows exactly what the committee is going to be looking for. And just the culture of the committee, you know, is markedly different from what it was years ago. Sure, we want to make sure that everyone is engaging in like this robust evaluation. But that comes across, I think, obviously I'm biased, in a much more positive way. And the goal of the committee, or the committee, sees its role as a way to help programs to identify for the college the resources that programs need from the college in order to meet their goals. So it's not like you're in this ship by yourself on this island by yourself, trying to figure out how to do this stuff that this outside, you know, program is telling you that you have to do. It's here are all of the things that the institution is providing for us in order to help our students be successful, because that's what it is at the end of the day. So that was a really long-winded way of saying, I don't think that's the case anymore. And probably, I think, you know, if anyone has recently gone through program review on this session, they may or may not, I would hope, may attest to that. But it has, I think, changed significantly.
Oh, definitely. It is a much kinder, gentler group of people than it was
It is
previously.
a much
Yeah.
different feel
Yeah.
than it did in the past.
Right, Dale?
It's not easy, but it is a much different feel. It's not a bad thing to go through now at all.
Definitely. And it isn't easy. You're absolutely right, Dale. It is not an easy process because, you know, obviously there's an amount of work associated with this, and it's writing. And look, we all understand, you as faculty members, you have another job that you're doing, which is to teach class and to do other kinds of things. We get it, right? But this is a critically important process for us institutionally, right? And it's a great way for you all to be reflective in thinking about our programs and what you're doing and what kinds of training are we getting and how are we helping our part-timers, for instance, and, you know, what are the services our students really need, and are we in fact being successful in getting them on to the next level? And like all of these things are critically important for us institutionally, because what that equates to is student success. I mean, if we didn't have student success, guess what, folks? You don't got jobs, and neither do I, right? If we don't get our students through these programs, or we don't successfully get them into the workforce, then the economy declines and we don't have jobs, right? So again, take it for what it is, right? It's a self-reflective, evaluative process for you all that helps the whole institution to try to achieve a more effective means of using public resources, you know. So,
and you know, I want to say one more thing that came out of another session about this. It's really hard to appreciate that process in the writing semester. So as Don was saying, we all have other jobs to do, right? We think of them as other jobs, but really this is like part of that. And so in the semester, when you have to analyze the data and fill out the template and do all those things and meet all those deadlines, it's hard to be appreciative of what you're getting out of that. But the very same person who said that's in another session said, but after you look back and you think about all of the things that you learned about what's happening in your area, and this is not just for instructional. I mean, this is the same thing for service units, right? As you had time to do that reflection, that looking back on it, it gives you kind of like, it excites you again, it reinvigorates you for helping our students to be successful. So in the moment, it's hard to appreciate it, and that's totally understandable. But after, I think it's when it's most meaningful.
Yeah. So, and if you need help, like you find yourself, you know, like I want to just point out Crystal, for instance. Crystal jumped in and helped out with like the dance one, for instance, and she was a 1-year temp and she did all of this. Thank you for helping us. I mean, these things, again, we need them done. We know that sometimes it's a big burden on individuals, but reach out to your colleagues, reach out to the, you know, to Kirsten, for instance. Kirsten is a wealth of knowledge, folks, okay, on this process. She has been doing it for some period of time. She understands curriculum processes. She understands a planning process. She's been involved in all of this. And she really, I mean, the templates and the changes for the last 4 years, she's been involved in all of those templates and changes. She does the training. This is the person to go to. Don't ask me, okay? Ask Kirsten, okay? She knows all there is to know about this. I like the big picture stuff. She understands the details of how to get stuff done. So please use Kirsten for that as well. She is willing to jump in and help you with stuff. So she's really great at it. So real quick, I'll just get a couple minutes and I'm gonna let you go early, okay? So maybe you can get a little coffee or something. Amy, don't get so happy there. I see you smiling up there. So you may be aware, if you haven't, I am doing a session later on CurricuNet. It's being back, but basically we had CurricuNet before. It is a curriculum system. It has morphed into a system that is more integrated and now has in it program review, unit planning, SLO assessment, curriculum development, catalog, all kinds of stuff. And so what we're hoping, as this concept of an integrated planning process, a circular one, continuous improvement, the integration of this allows us to be able to get information more easily, display that information more easily. And so when we get to this, I'm just happen to be in the sandbox for CurricuNet. But once we get in, Kirsten and I are going to be working on this and developing it this fall based upon the template we already have. We're getting ready to get that information into the system. We'll start utilizing it with the curriculum, with the program review committee. Okay? But this process, and I just want to show you this, that on the production side as well as this one, when you click the create proposal, right, you have various proposal types. And so again, we're going to one place for us to do this work. Faculty, you're going to go here, do your curriculum. Faculty, you're going to go here, do your program review. Faculty, you're going to go here and do your unit and action planning. Right? Service units, you're going to go here and do your program review. You're going to go here and do your unit action planning. We're going to go here and do our resource allocation process as well at some point in the future, because there's a planning module that's built into this as well. We don't have it yet, but it's one of those things that we're going to be working on. We have timelines established for all of these. Myself and Kirsten this fall, Enrique and I this fall. We'll start working through the SLO assessment one, the program review, now that curriculum's done. But this is where we're going to go to do these things. And you'll see there is a program review area, and there is instructional program review, occupational program review. We're going to add the one for the service unit review into this. But you know, when we click on this and do next, these things will populate. We're not there yet, folks. I'm just telling you, this is where we're moving towards. They'll populate with your division and, you know, the department. And then, you know, you can put in your title for your program review, and then you'll click next. And then you'll start working through that same kind of template you're currently using. You're going to use that in this environment as well. We're going to pull in your institutional data. Right? That data that we give you as part of the PR process, that's going to get pulled into this as well. And then what you're going to do after you've submitted this is next year, you're going to go in and you're going to go to the annual unit plan. You're going to pull up the goal from your program review and you're going to update it. And then you're going to hit submit and you're done. Right? And then you say, oh, I need a resource request. You're going to go into here. You're going to go to that resource request. You're going to say, based upon this unit plan, here's my resource request. You're going to submit. And then I'm going to be able to utilize this system to see all of the unit plans, right? What their progress is, all of the resource requests, right? All the implementation timelines, all of those kinds of things will all be part of this. So I think we institutionally are going to become better at allocating the resources and making sure that we're doing the right kinds of things to help support you, because of course you're helping support our students, right? And so we're going to be able to do this process for assessments as well. There's going to be an area for the overall assessment. There's a catalog area. I'm going to start working with Nylene in my office in the spring of 22 to develop the catalog electronically within this system. And then we'll be able to display that on our website. We're going to do course mapping as part of that. We're going to display that course mapping in our website. Right, you're going to be able to drive students to an electronic catalog. It's going to be really terrific stuff once we get all of this implemented. By the fall of 22, I think we should be done with all of the components and start to actually use them. So it does take some time, sorry. Kirsten, you want to say anything else?
Just that I'm super excited to start using this. I think it's going to be really helpful.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's going to be great. So any other
That
questions?
looks awesome. That looks absolutely awesome.
It should be. It should be. So we got a lot of work to do. It took us about 6.5 months, 6 months to get all the curriculum updated. You know, we moved from eLumen to CurricuNet. We had a couple years worth of new updates and new curriculum. We've put that all into the system. They're doing training today for those who are writing their curriculum review process, right? They're doing that training today and over the next 3 weeks as well. And so for you who are going to be writing new curriculum, modifying, you're going to be using the new system and you are going to be very happy, I promise. It is so much easier to use, so much easier. All right, so, all right, anybody, any questions? Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, this is kind of like a logistic question. If our department is presenting program review fall 2021, what year is our curriculum cycle, or when do we start doing that?
Fall 22.
Fall, so a whole year from
It's
now.
always a year after. Mhm.
Okay.
The idea is that in program review, you identify your changes. And so for you so fall, you've identified your changes. In spring, you could start to like strategize how you're going to implement them. And then it'll be due, it's always due the third week. Curriculum is always due the third Friday of the start of the semester. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The week 3 of the start of the semester.
So, and then you'll walk through that curriculum process with the curriculum committee. They do all of the reviews and that kind of thing. And then typically it gets active the following fall. So, so if it's fall of 22, it becomes active fall of 23. Typically, now some cases, particularly occupational programs, they typically will ask that it become effective spring, right? The next semester kind of thing. But normally it's the following year because that allows us to then also make changes to the catalog, to anything associated with the degrees and certificates, get all of those things in place. And then that way students have in that fall of say 23, the new program, the new catalog, the new certificate, the new degree, all of those things are available to them.
There was a question in the chat that we missed, but I don't understand the context of it right now. So regarding CTE programs, what type of accreditations are pursued or being planned?
So I think I can answer this one.
Okay.
We don't specifically look for accreditations at a program level institutionally, but as a program, you could go out and look for or if there are either accreditations. So prime example, dental hygiene, nursing, right? These programs have outside accrediting bodies, right? The Bureau of Registered Nursing, right? The BRN, they have accreditation standards for nursing programs, right? And so our dental hygiene has one. I believe our respiratory care and our rad tech have them. And we used to have one with HIT, Health Information Technology. And I think that we have decided not to do the accreditation process with that particular one. So there are those that you could do, or you could look for licensure that specifically, I know automotive and welding are specific areas that have licensure that they're seeking for their students to meet those skills associated with getting a license in those areas. Does that make sense, Carlos?
Absolutely. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay. So if you had one, let's say in engineering, Carlos, you could talk with your discipline faculty about that and then say, okay, look, we'd really like to make sure that our program alignment from a skills perspective meets these requirements for this, license, let's say, as an engineer. I
Right.
got it right, right? Engineering, right?
Yeah, engineering. You got it right.
I remembered. I see so many people. I sometimes forget. I apologize, but good to see you, Carlos. Thank you.
Good to see you too, Don.
Hi, Don. This is Cindy, Don.
Yeah. Hi, Cindy.
In terms of the adding the service units to CurricuLearn, will that include Career and Employment Center?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when will that be activated?
Well, we hope to have by the end of the fall, this available for people to start, building theirs in the spring of 22.
Okay,
That's kind of the timeline. It might be that we do a spring 22 pilot with a full rollout fall of 22. Just depends upon how fast we get moving on some of these things. Kirsten's already been working with the vendor on getting some of the template info in.
okay,
And Cindy, if you normally do a program review or
Yes.
what we're calling a service unit review, then you would continue to do that and you will do it inside of this system. This is not just for instructional stuff.
okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
We just hit our 10-minute mark.
Okay. All right, well, let me give you back 10 minutes of your time.
Thanks for participating.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it very much. If you have any questions, please get in touch with Kirsten or myself.